my name is Allie Slinker. I am doing a lesson for EDUC 380 for Module 7. This is a contextualized vocabulary lesson. I'm using a 4th grade reading passage, so my lesson is written for 4th grade, but this lesson could be done anywhere from 2nd grade on. This lesson or this intervention principle is targeted for 2nd grade on up to benefit them. The Common Core standards that I used for 4th grade were to determine or clarify the meaning of unknown and multiple meaning words, and then also the Common Core L 4.6, where it is acquire and use accurately age and grade appropriate general academic and domain specific words and phrases, including those that signal precise actions, emotions, or states of being. Since we are reading a certain passage, and these words will help them understand the content and be able to comprehend that certain passage. My objective is that students will be able to develop in-depth knowledge of word meanings. And the materials needed for this is just a copy of the Alaska Adventure, one for each student. This could be done in a group setting as an entire whole class, or it can be done in an intervention group or a couple students at a time. The way I'm setting it up today to do with my setup is just a reading group session, so with 2 to 3 or 4 students at my table, and then we would be working on this passage here. So I will then go ahead and begin this lesson. So first, today we are going to be reading a new passage, but before we begin reading, we're going to work on learning some of the new words that we're going to encounter while reading this passage. This will help us better understand the words used in the passage and help us to comprehend what we are reading. So we're going to start with the first word that we will work on during this little lesson before we read. So let's say this word together. Vista. What is this word? And my students would respond with vista. A vista is a faraway scenic view or a beautiful view from a high place where you're able to look down or look out far ways and see a beautiful view. So for example, when we are reading our book or reading our passage that we're going to be working on, Jake climbed to a top of a hill and took a picture of the beautiful vista that stretched out as far as he could see. So why would Jake climb the hill? I would let my students respond, saying that I would hope they would want to see a far view. He climbed up to see a far view, or so that he could see a vista and catch a beautiful picture. And then my next question would be, what could he see when he got to the top? I would give time for the students to respond, maybe responding with the new word vista, or saying different things that he would see when he was able to look up high to get this vista picture. And so what do you think vista means? And I would invite my students to provide a definition of vista in their own words to help them better understand it. So where might you go to enjoy a scenic vista? Where could we go where we live to see a scenic vista? And again, I would invite students for their response. And then I'm now going to start some sentences. And when I start these sentences, I would like you guys to respond and fill in the end of the sentence and complete my sentence for me. This helps you realize that you are able to use this word in your conversations and use this in your vocabulary. So the vista stretched out to the horizon from where we stood on the... And I would invite my students to complete that sentence. And to then go ahead and have my students connect their prior knowledge or their prior experiences to this new word I would ask them, can you describe the most beautiful vista that you have ever seen? Where were you when you saw this vista? What did you see when you saw this vista? I would then be using this same teaching template with all of the words in this lesson. So once we go through vista, I would go with coordinate. So very good. Coordinate, and we would go through the same steps that we did with vista, but using the word coordinate, where I would then have the students pronounce this with me, and then I would give them a student-friendly explanation, and then provide them with different contexts of this word and how they would use this in their own vocabulary and what this word means. And then I would engage students by asking them questions and getting them using that word and trying to get them to understand the different concepts of this word and how this fits into our vocabulary. And then do the sentence starters, and then having this word apply to prior knowledge or prior experiences for the students. So with this lesson, I would pick out the 4 target words. So in my lesson I have written up, I have the vista, coordinate, route, and then also interior was my other one. So with those 4 words, we would then do this, the steps of going through all of that, getting the prior knowledge, giving them student-friendly definitions, context clues, and getting them ready for understanding that word. So once I had done that with all 4 words, I would then present the students with very good. Now that we all have a great understanding of how these words, what these words mean and how we can use them in our language, we're now going to read our Alaska Adventure passage. We're going to read this independently and silently. And when we are done reading, we will discuss our passage when we're all done. So I would like everyone to read and fold your paper over, your Alaska Adventure passage over, when you are ready to begin our discussion. So I would allow each student their time for reading that. And since I am doing the group setting, I would just have the few that I would be watching and asking them or following along and seeing if they had questions as they were reading. So then the discussion examples, since this is a vocabulary lesson, the questions I'm going to be asking them is getting them to use the story and context to discuss these words' meanings. So some sample questions that I could ask these students would be, Jake snapped pictures of every new vista. What kinds of things would you see in his pictures? Getting them to relate vista to what they have read in the story. And what do mom and dad have to do to coordinate their work schedule and Jake's school schedule? So we're using the word coordinate in that question, getting them to understand more of the context of that word. Another question would be, what kinds of experiences might Jake have when he visits the interior of Alaska? So using the word interior to get them to provide more context and get a better understanding of that word. The last question could be that Dad wants to retrace the route that he and Jake had already taken. Jake wants to see something new. Which route would you take if you had a choice? So this would get them using that word route and getting a better explanation and a better understanding of what a route is and using that in discussion. And you would allow this discussion to go out if students have other questions or if they're adding on or expanding. We're allowing them to guide the discussion as well, but getting them to use these words. And a couple of error corrections. So if a student were to pronounce a word wrong, you would then just say, so say if they said route, if you wrote the word route, but they said route, you could then, you would say, this word is route. Let's all say this word together again. So you're explicitly acknowledging that error and correcting it right away. And if a student provides you with the wrong definition of a word, so say they said route is what grows out of a plant, you would say a root is what grows out of a plant. We are discussing a route. A route means the way you get from point A to point B, or the way that you get from place to place. And then for individualization instruction, for special education, we want to provide students, if we're providing this in a whole class setting, we want to provide these students then with some individualized instruction. So when they come back to our table to work one-on-one, maybe get them to highlight these words as they're reading, give them a little more explicit instruction of these words, getting them to use them. It is also important when using this lesson, if it is an individualized lesson where you're doing the groups, we want these passages to be instructional reading passages that are appropriate for each student in the group. My English language learners, individualized instruction is to point out the cognates of the word, to help them form that relationship between the words and know that this word relates to this word in their language, to help them with comprehending and understanding this passage. For the talented and gifted, again, making sure the passage is reading level appropriate, and then present these students with, maybe give them that passage first, and give them the list of the target words and have them derive or think of a definition, a working definition for that word, what they would define that word as by using context clues. And another extension to that, if these students if they got done with that fast too before we got done with our whole group lesson, have these students then create the word maps for the target words. This would then allow them a deeper understanding of those words. So this is my lesson on contextualized vocabulary.